glasses. All right. Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology Podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn, and back by popular demand, if nothing else by the two of us, Big Underdog Blog, Mr. Jason Carmello, here to help us get through a little bit of this bubble Selection Tuesday, as I'm going to be calling it all week. Why not? We just watched Stanford lose to Pittsburgh. Graham, you were ready to go on a rant about what this does to Stanford. So please begin that rant now that we are actually live.
Well, I know it was an unpopular opinion because I think most bracketologists, from what I've seen, they have Stanford in. I did not have Stanford in entering the day. Obviously, the 3 losses is notable, but what really got me for Stanford is typically when you see a team get in with that kind of profile, their best wins are really, really good. And I just felt like Stanford's best wins were good. They weren't awesome wins. And I think this is a death knell for Stanford. The Cardinal losing to Pitt is going to send their WOB down to about minus 0.7 or so. There's no way I can see them getting into the tournament with 4 bad losses, a WOB that's not close, and their top wins really not being that awesome of wins. So I think Stanford is truly eliminated from NCAA tournament contention because you'd rather take a team that loses to a halfway decent team that's already on the bubble headed in there. So I really just don't see any path whatsoever for Stanford at this point.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. Jason, do you also concur Stanford's dead at this point?
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, that back end they've struggled and have some bad losses. And I always go to the tiebreaker. If a team's even close to making it, did they schedule in the non-conference? Their strength the schedule in the non-conference was 279. And so there's really no redeeming quality on Stanford's resume other than a couple wins, but that can't negate all of the bad metrics, the bad scheduling, and then some really bad losses late.
Yeah. To Graham's point, their best wins, they did beat St. Louis on a neutral, although that's lost a lot of value in the last few weeks as St. Louis stubs its own toe down the stretch. Home wins over Louisville minus Michael Brown Jr. for that game, and North Carolina, which I believe that was for UNC their second game. Yeah, that was the first game of that West Coast road trip where they came back with no wins. What else? Home against SMU, and then that win at NC State to end the season. That may have been their best, and the Wolfpack are dead and dying as well. And I think we can transition there next with just what this does for the ACC in general. So now NC State has to deal with Pitt instead of a possible play-in game against Stanford if the Cardinals have been able to win this game. That might be a play-out game for the Wolfpack, who have lost 6 out of 7. I noted earlier today, I think on February 8th they were 11-5 against quads 1 and 2 with 1 quad 3 loss. Now they are 11-11 against quads 1 and 2 with 1 quad 4 loss. I don't think I've ever seen a resume get this bad this quickly. But that will be tomorrow around this time. I'm not sure what time exactly, but let's just gun to your head. If Pitt pulls off the upset, do you think NC State drops out as well? Jason, let's start with you. And I mean, you can start your argument with, we'll see if anybody else in the bubble decides they want to get in.
I'm gonna go. It's bid thief dependent, but if I have to make a choice, I say they end up in Dayton. If they lose to Pitt, they end up in Dayton. I'd say in the back end of the Dayton is the second or so last team in.
Graham, what do you think?
I think NC State, if they lose to Pitt, is probably in for the time being. But by the time we get to Selection Sunday, there's too many bid thieves and they drop out.
Yeah, I think we're probably all around there, and we're all rooting for bid thieves this year. Some years we don't. I want every bid thief. Right now, I have NC State at 42, so I have them 1 spot ahead of Dayton right now. And beating Pitt isn't going to increase their profile at all. They might need to win the following game, which I believe is against Virginia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's right.
To really solidify their bid. Sticking in the ACC, we're going to have SMU Syracuse coming up in a couple of minutes. We didn't really talk about that one on our pod yesterday, but same general question. If SMU loses, are they out? Because right now they are my second to last team in, and I don't want them in. Graham, how about we start with you on the Mustangs?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the caveat of what we don't know what else happens, but I think SMU's out if they lose. I would be surprised if they end up in the final field. They haven't done enough road work, and that includes true road games, but also neutral courts. If they lose to Syracuse, they would have that win against Texas A&M, but that's about all holding up the profile at this point. And some, let's be honest, like they beat North Carolina handily, but other than that, they've been winning close even at home. It hasn't been dominant performances by any means. I think SMU, when you look at the team itself and the total profile, I don't think they hold up to scrutiny. I think SMU is out if they lose to Syracuse.
Yeah, Graham,
Jason, what do you think?
I completely agree. Plus, they'll end up on the wrong side of the WAB, right? I mean, they'll have a negative WAB, and the committee's talked about the importance of that number. I agree they'll be out. They may hang on to dear life as the last team in, for a couple days here this week, but they'll slide out when a Mountain West, a bid thief comes, or maybe a MAC bid thief comes, or A10.
How about just the ACC in general? Because there is a scenario, right? We came into this tournament with five very bubbly teams. We already saw one of them lost. If SMU and Virginia Tech lose today, they might both be out. Cal could very easily lose to Florida State, and I think Cal was already probably in the worst shape of the five teams on the overall seed list. And then we already mentioned NC State. So if those teams were to go 0-5, I think we have 6 locks from the ACC. Would at least one of those 5 just find their way in just because we need to get to 68 teams somehow? I mean, would it be NC State of that group? What do you think? Just in the hypothetical that they all end up losing. Jason, I'll throw that one to you.
Yeah, Kerry, NC State, I think, survives in that kind of Armageddon. NC State survives. I think the other teams don't make it. I'll say this: I actually really like Virginia Tech's draw for this. They get past Wake. They play a Clemson team that at times, Clemson has good statistical metrics, so it counts as a really nice win on your resume. But Clemson is a bit of fool's gold, and then they can move on to a Carolina team, obviously without Caleb Wilson. And so for a Virginia Tech team that Mike Young lost all hope Saturday at Virginia and went on a rant. Very possible. It's very possible to win these 3 games. Virginia Tech always plays hard. They're always in the game. 2 weeks ago, they almost beat Carolina at Chapel Hill. So I think Tech has it. But yeah, going back to your previous point, I think NC State's a little bit ahead of everybody. They have a little more wiggle room to absorb. These other teams just don't.
Graham, I'll pitch it to you there, noting that, yeah, NC State has the most wiggle room, but they also have the worst possible loss coming their way now if they were to lose to Pitt. Graham, what do you think of that 0-5 scenario and of Virginia Tech's path as well?
Yeah, I think 0-5, it's only NC State. That's the only team I see potentially getting in the Armageddon scenario, just like Jason said. I will say, I don't think Virginia Tech has to beat Clemson. I think they probably have to beat Clemson. I don't think it's for sure because, as you mentioned, if we get into that Armageddon scenario, beating Wake Forest as a 9th Q1-2 win. That might possibly be enough if the bubble Armageddons. I doubt it. I think they probably have to beat both Wake and Clemson, but all of a sudden in that scenario, their WAB's pretty good. I would think with 10 quad 1 and 2 wins at that point and no bad losses, that's probably enough.
Let's pivot quickly to the other game that has already gone final today. That was Arizona State surviving against Baylor in the Big 12's 12-13 matchup. In theory, 12-13, it shouldn't be, a bubble potential, but both of those 15-loss teams maybe had a pulse if they were to then turn around and beat Iowa State. Arizona State, I mean, they have a terrible quad 4 loss. I'm forgetting who it was even to. All I could think of is Loyola Chicago's loss to Santa Clara, or excuse me, Loyola Chicago's win over Santa Clara. But they are 9-14 against quads 1 and 2. A win over Iowa State would obviously be a big feather in the cap for a team that's already just outside the top 60 in the resume metrics. That could get them over the hump. certainly following up with a win over Texas Tech, even though, Texas Tech is what it is now without JT Toppin. That's a massive resume win. I think they're one win away from getting into the conversation and probably 2 wins away from getting maybe even into the field and clear of Dayton. Jason, what do you think of Arizona State?
Yeah, their profile has really grown over the past couple weeks, right? I mean, they were left for dead. Everybody talked about Hurley being on the outs. The reason why they have a chance to win tomorrow against Iowa State is they're actually 4-1 on neutral court games. They play oddly quite well in neutral court. Beat Santa Clara, beat Texas, beat Oklahoma. So it's very possible that they could register some games away from home. Listen, their home games, they're used to playing in a pretty empty place. So it's they didn't have the home court advantage, and Hurley was very vocal about it. Kansas, Texas Tech, those are really big wins. The committee's going to be very, very particular about who's the first team in with 16 losses. So I think they have a lot of work to do. I still would put the odds are probably, under 15, 20% for them to get in, but there's a heartbeat.
Graham, what do you think on the your Sun Devils?
I agree with all of that, and I think to Kerry's point, one win I think gets them right in the conversation. But if they get two, if they've got 2 wins over Texas Tech, and now they add wins against Iowa State and Kansas, we're talking about a horrible bubble, right? That's all the talk is. Nobody in the bubble can beat anybody. We've got a team that's beaten top-notch teams, and to your point, Jason, they've won some neutral court games. In that Santa Clara game, we don't even know what Santa Clara is going to look like. If they beat Gonzaga, maybe that's a very impressive win in the committee's eyes by the time we get to Sunday. We don't know that yet. But regardless, Santa Clara is almost certainly in the field. So that's another win over a tournament team for Arizona State. That has grown in size here in just the last 24 hours. I think Arizona State is certainly in the conversation if they win tomorrow. And 2 wins, my gut tells me they probably get in.
They also, one of their neutral court wins was over Texas, which could be important head-to-head wise.
Yeah.
I have Texas 44. Graham, I believe you had them at 43 as of yesterday. So wherever they are, Texas is hovering somewhat close to the cut line and would be a 14 or 15 loss team in its own right. And committee's looking for a reason to keep the Longhorns out at like 1-9 in their best 10 games. Although probably not, because they're an SEC team. Why would the committee be looking to keep them out? But Santa Clara, good segue for us there. We'll go to the WCC. Obviously, that big game last night. I somehow stayed awake for it and regretted it in the morning. Had to come home from the bus stop and take a nap. But Santa Clara, I'm still not willing to call them a lock, but I think they're like at this point, I would be shocked if they don't get in. It feels like they have a 98, 99% chance, and it would take some serious carnage, but I would love for them to just go out and seal the deal tonight. Don't let Gonzaga take that title belt with it to the reanimated Pac-12. But as things stand, where do you see Santa Clara? And if they win tonight, where do they land on your seed list, Jason?
So right now, for me, Santa Clara, they had to win last night. They did to stay in the field, and now I think they're sitting right now kind of on the best team that goes to Dayton, at least for me. And they're waiting for Texas, NC State, maybe UCF. They're waiting for one of those teams to get beat, and then just take that spot and kind of stay there. I see them just on the possibility of kind of just escaping Dayton, or if they get beat tonight, maybe they're the best team in the Dayton field. With a win, I think there's a chance they can get to the back end of the 10 line. Their metrics are good. Their wins above bubble is going to be pretty good, and they're statistically they've been a really good team all year. It's how much is the committee going to dock them for that Loyola Chicago loss? I mean, that's the question. But historically, they've rewarded the good wins much more than the quad four losses.
Graham, where are you at with the Broncos at this point?
I view Santa Clara very similarly to Miami at this point, Miami, Ohio, where I can't call them a lock because it's a profile that I don't see enough big wins in both ways to say that they're certainly going to the dance. But I also think that it's so far above what other teams are doing right now that I can't see a scenario where I won't have them in the bracket. But moving on to the seed, if they beat Gonzaga, I could see maybe even sneaking onto the back of the 9 line.
Hmm.
I just think that when you start talking about a neutral court win over St. Mary's and a neutral court win over Gonzaga, it looks pretty good at that point compared to some of the teams that we've seen do work away from home, especially when you consider Santa Clara doesn't have as many opportunities to pick up those kinds of wins. We'll have to see what happens. I can't see Santa Clara higher than a 9, but I could see maybe Santa Clara gets there if some of the teams they're competing with lose early this week.
Yeah, I think I'm like splitting the difference between you guys. I was struggling whether to put them at 40 or 41 overall. I could see them climbing to about 36 if they do win that game tonight. Because until what 16 hours ago, I mean, they didn't have a great win at all. These would all of a sudden be their two best wins of the entire season. And to Jason's point, they already had great metrics. So, and we kind of talked about Gonzaga yesterday, so I don't think we need to reinvent that wheel unless Jason, you have any hot takes on where Gonzaga should be on the seed list, win or lose.
No, I think it's actually kind of a big game for the Zags to finish and get this one, and try to get on that 3 line. I think there's a possibility for
Mhm.
the 3 line, possibility for the 4 line to meet with them. They're going to be at the mercy of some of the stuff happening around them. But the advantage that the Zags have is this game's being played on Tuesday and not being played on Saturday, and so they'll
Yeah.
get full credit for this win.
Yeah, that's always key with the West Coast Conference tournament in both directions. Sometimes that semifinal loss that a team takes, usually St. Mary's, if it's taking it, it can hurt them a little bit. Um, did either of you drop the Gales at all for last night's loss?
Yeah, I think St. Mary's has to drop a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought they were looking at potentially even getting up to a 6 seed by the time we got to Selection Sunday. Now I think there's a very good chance they're going to end up in that 8-9 game.
What about you,
Yeah,
Jason?
very back of the 7 or very back of the 7 or the front side of the 8. It'll be dependent on, how does UCLA play? How does a team like that play? Can Ohio State make a little bit of a run when Ohio State plays Iowa? How's that work out? Someone's going to get credit for a win. So a little bit of traffic around them. Back of 7, early 8 for St. Mary's. Their profile is a little thinner than it's been in years past. Even
Yeah.
last year, it was a little bit stronger. And I really felt the committee last year took the names into consideration quite a bit. And then, St. Mary's and San Diego States of the world, like they got a little bit of an advantage. I think they were seeded a little bit better than maybe they should be based on name brand of some of the mid majors. So it'll be interesting to see if they get another benefit of the doubt. Obviously, it's a really strong winning percentage, but the depth of wins in the non-conference wasn't nearly as strong as it has been in the last 5-6 years.
Yeah. And I don't think a home win over Gonzaga is what it was in previous years. I mean, it's a nice feather in the cap, but this isn't 2017 or 2022 Gonzaga. This is
Yep.
more barely top 10 Gonzaga, but I mean, they're not on the bubble. I agree. They're somewhere in that 25 to 28 type of range, could slip to the 8 seed line. Go ahead, Greg.
What's their great win away from home? I've
Yeah.
struggled to think about that.
St. Mary's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they have one. I tend to think they're headed for the 8-9 game. Especially the other thing that goes into my mind here is it's a timing thing now. All the hay is in the barn for St. Mary's, as we love to talk about for the WCC tournament. Now, what's going to happen with these power conference teams? They're going to start to get seeded when they haven't taken their final conference tournament loss. So the
Mhm.
committee's going to see these teams with maybe a little bit better WAB or strength of record than they're actually going to end with. And once they lose a game to a good team in the conference tournament, the committee's not going to move them. They're just going to stick with where they were.
All right. And we have, I think I jotted down 7 teams just trying to avoid a bad loss at this point in the next 24 hours. We already mentioned Virginia Tech and SMU and now NC State. But I think obviously Auburn is the big one. 16 and 15 overall. They will face Mississippi State today. I think every bracketologist outside of the state of Alabama is rooting for Mississippi State just to kill Auburn dead, unless you really want to grapple with whether or not Auburn should be in the field for the rest of the week. But if they win this game, let's assume they will. What more do they need to do? Is it just about getting to that, 2 games, 3 games above 500? Do they actually need to do anything to improve the best wins on the profile? Where are you at with Auburn? We'll start with Graham on this one.
I think if Auburn wins 3, they're going to the tournament. I think if they win 2, they're probably going to the tournament. If they win 1 or less, they're out.
Yeah,
Jason,
I agree. I agree. The only path for them to feel good on going to Selection Sunday is beat Mississippi State, beat Tennessee, and beat Vandy, and that's a lot of work. And they haven't played very well, especially the last 10 games. But that's the path for them. They do have, obviously Stephen Pearl mentioned it. Their one advantage is if the committee's going to go on record and set a precedent of 16 losses, that strength of schedule better be a single digit, and it is. Right? It's 3 now. It'll maybe even be 2 or 1 by the time it's all said and done. But I agree, Graham. Completely agree with you. 3 wins gets them in. Anything less than that's probably a tough go.
yeah, I think that road win over Florida is just going to carry so much weight with this committee. And then the win over St. John's as well. I mean, if they can justify putting Auburn in, I think they're going to, especially if we end up having, all 5 of these ACC teams losing. And then it's just a matter of, dear God, we have to pick something. And, we know they're not going to go with a 2-bid MAC if they can avoid it.
A question back to you guys. The more I study it, everybody's on Auburn. Right. Everybody's on Auburn, and I get why. But as I kind of keep grinding away at this, I feel like Texas is getting a bit of a free pass. And Texas is acquiring quite a few losses here. They got another one coming. And they've had losses in recent years and still made it. But I feel like Texas is getting a free pass, and their resume isn't all that different.
Yeah. Graham, go ahead and start because you were asking me about Texas last night.
Right there, right? I have the Longhorn in the first 4.
Yeah.
I think Texas's profile is not holding up. They better win in the SEC tournament, or I think they're out for good reason. I feel like they haven't won enough for the schedule that they've played. At least with Auburn. With Auburn, you can look at all the quality games that they've played. I don't think there's too much depth to the profile, but at least they played a ton of great games. Texas didn't do that. They did the same thing they did last year, which is win a bunch of quad 4 games. I think that the committee, if they go under the hood with Texas, they'll be a little bit less impressed than they look at first blush.
Before I offer my opinion on Texas, Playing Devil's Advocate Pod asked, Kerry, do you own any non-Nats clothing? I love it. It's March. It's the one time of the year that I'm allowed to be optimistic about the Nationals because by May, I don't want to wear this crap anymore. They're going to be terrible. But no, I agree, Texas. I have them at 44. Graham, when you texted me, I think you were looking at Rocco's seedless. He had them at like 36. And we were it's like, no, I have them at 44. I don't know how anybody has them comfortably in. I mean, I love Rocco. I'm not questioning his analysis. I was surprised to see anybody has Texas that high. I think they probably need to beat Ole Miss. Is that today or tomorrow? I think it's today. Yeah, today. They need to win. No, tomorrow. Excuse me. Tomorrow evening. It's not in the next 24 hours. That's why I'm confused because we're doing this at 4 p.m. and I'm trying to get these cutoffs. But I think they need to beat Ole Miss, and I think they probably need to beat Georgia because it's not going to resonate as an okay loss. I don't think. I mean, I know Georgia's comfortably in, but it's just something about Georgia. Like losing to Georgia doesn't feel like an okay thing for a bubble team to do, especially if they're desperate. But that could be the scenario where the committee watches Texas win 2 games together, and then they manage to sneak them into the field, even though their profile maybe doesn't deserve it. Yeah, so we touched on Auburn. Whoop. What else we got here? Cincinnati, Oklahoma State. Do we think either of them have much of a pulse if they were to win? I think they both play later tonight. Graham, you're the Big 12 guy. Why don't you take us away on Cincinnati and Oklahoma State?
Well, Cincinnati's playing Utah right now.
Yes.
Cincinnati has to win that one, obviously, but they also have to beat UCF. Here's where it gets interesting. They get Arizona after that. If they beat Arizona, all of a sudden, I think Cincinnati's in the field. I also think there's an interesting scenario where the committee potentially looks at Cincinnati and UCF in a head-to-head comparison, says, I know what the WOB says, but I like Cincinnati's wins better than I like UCF's wins. And who do I think is better? Cincinnati by a long shot. I wouldn't be surprised if there's ever a time to throw out the metrics. I think it's with Cincinnati and UCF and just say, you know what? You beat them head to head on a neutral court in a game UCF had to have. we'll give you their spot. Very similar to what we were talking about with Stanford and NC State. I think the same thing could potentially play out with Cincinnati and UCF. As for Oklahoma State, they have to beat Colorado, obviously, and then they would get a shot at Houston potentially. If they could beat Houston down the road, that could be a big victory for Oklahoma State. So I wouldn't rule out the Cowboys yet. That said, without Parson Allen, I just don't think they have it in them.
So I think if I'm unless I'm looking at the wrong bracket, I think Oklahoma State plays TCU and then Kansas. I don't think they would run into Houston until the semifinals. And that kind of feels similar to me with Texas. Like a win over TCU is not going to feel great. Like they probably need to go out and beat Kansas. So I think they're 3 wins away from really becoming legitimate, which I mean probably should be the case after they fell to what 18 and 13, blew that opportunity against Houston to end the regular season. Now you really got to make up for it. But Jason, what do you think on those two pseudo bubble Big 12 teams?
I agree. You know, a lot of these teams that are on the periphery, it's 3 wins or bust. You got to get 3 wins because by the time you get to that third one, you're facing a top 4 seed in each conference, and that'll start to move the needle. Until then, and you're just not going to get much traffic with it. It's not, you know, the 1 out of 32 data points that is your season. It won't move the needle quite enough. Like you said, Graham, though, beating Arizona will, beating Kansas potentially. Obviously Cincinnati's out ahead of Oklahoma State in my rankings, so they'd have the better chance of the 2.
It does to some extent help as well that Cincinnati would be playing that game. It looks like 3 p.m. on Thursday, and the Kansas Oklahoma State game would be pretty late in the evening on Thursday. We've always said around dinner time on Thursday is where the results kind of stop mattering. But I'm sure the committee would realize a Kansas loss that would come into play. But last question: BYU, Kansas State. If in any crazy world BYU loses that game, what happens to the Cougars, who we in the mock committee recently got up to 24 overall? I think that's where I have them in my personal bracket as well. So they're in that 6-7 range. What would happen to BYU if they lose that? And what's BYU's ceiling if they were to get hot, even without Richie Saunders? Their path is Kansas State today, and then West Virginia, and then Houston to reach the quarterfinals. Graham, what do you think about BYU?
I think even if they win the Big 12 tournament, a 5 seed's the best BYU is going to do.
Wow.
I think a 7 seed is probably where they're going to head if they lose to Kansas State.
All right, Jason?
I agree. Back of the 5 line, if everything broke right for them and they made it all the way to the Big 12 finals, I think no one, you guys have talked about this all year, no one really wants the last of the 6 seeds. So BYU, it's theirs. It's theirs for the taking. It's been theirs for the taking. I think everybody wants them to take it. We'll see. They're going to have to probably win 2 games to take a 6 line. Anything less than that, they end up on the early part of the 7 line.
It's crazy how many teams in that like 24 range there. It's like Louisville, Villanova, BYU, all these teams that look good in the metrics, but just can't go get those big. I mean, at least BYU finally got one, but comes with a JT Toppin asterisk. But any parting thoughts from either of you guys? Graham, take it away.
I'm very interested to see if Iowa State wins their first game against Arizona State. We talked about it from the Arizona State angle. From the Iowa State angle, they're knocking on the door of a 2 seed, but all of a sudden, if they get an early Wednesday result before the committee ever meets, they will see Iowa State has a 6-7 record against the first 2. Actually, I don't even think Arizona State's top 50. So they'd be 6-6 versus quad 1, but then they'd add a loss in quad 2 to Arizona State. I don't know if that's really worthy of a top 3 seed. I think the committee would have some serious concerns about Iowa State as a 3 seed if that result holds. So I feel pretty confident Iowa State's going to get a 3 as long as they beat Arizona State. But if they don't, I think that potentially cracks open the door on the 3 line.
Yeah, there's a lot up in the air there on the 3 line for sure. I think more so than in most years. But Jason, your parting thoughts?
My parting thoughts are I've never seen kind of shrapnel quite like this at the end of the year. I mean, SMU has lost their last 4. NC State lost 6 out of their last 7. Texas lost 4 of their last 5. UCF 6 out of their last 9, and Auburn 8 out of their last 10. I mean, those are just alarming numbers. We always have teams that are really struggling to finish, but this amount of teams is really is quite remarkable. And what we've seen is teams that have just kind of steadied their resume, like an Ohio State, right? That are just playing just good enough, went from the periphery of the bubble to Dayton, and now clear in the field avoiding Dayton by just kind of winning a couple home games here and there and winning against, some bad conference games. So I've never seen, everybody talks about the bubble being bad. Yes, but 6 weeks ago it was trending to being okay. Right? It was trending to being all right. It's been this last 3 weeks where it's really gone south.
Yeah, I mean, just look at VCU, right? We thought when they lost that game to St. Louis, like they're probably done, and now they're maybe clear of Dayton in the projected field right now, just because everything that happened that you just mentioned, like just the bubble just cratered around them. So yeah, we're sitting here on our knees begging somebody on the bubble to just take these spots that are so up for grabs. So we'll see what happens in the ACC and all these other tournaments the next couple of days. Jason, thank you so much for being with us again. Always good chatting with you. And until tomorrow, everybody take care and enjoy the